Hey there, loyal viewers! As you can tell, there is a reservoir of TV movie tropes that you can draw on for your game.
That's that briefcase from that one movie, the pulp with the pulp magazines, right? Pulp, what was it called? Remember from the other intro we were doing? That's the one, right? Yeah.
That's a smart eye there, Magnum.
I'm Hooper from
It's Hopper.
Hopper from Hawkins. The Stranger Things.
Yeah. Well, and I'm John Wick.
Okay.
It's TV movie tropes on WebDM. This episode is brought to you by the Dungeon Craft by 1985 Games.
Build your own battle maps in no time at all by using over 1,000 pieces of gorgeous terrain. They're a cool looking, easy to store, and affordable way to level up your combat. Each book contains tons of reversible pieces for building dungeons, cityscapes, and wilderness, along with all the creatures you'd need to run the battles.
They're back with a limited supply of books for the holidays, and once they sell out, that is it. Not only that, but when you use the code WebDM while placing your order, you'll get a special table mimic pin.
So check it out. Link in the description and comments.
All right, Jim. TV tropes and how to use them. When did this start, or is this just like human nature thing of just of paying homage to things that came before? I mean, this is like nothing new, right?
No, it's not really anything new. From the earliest days of the hobby, there were people statting up all their favorite literary characters, their favorite figures from mythology. There's that famous article from Gygax in an early Dragon magazine where he sort of like tracks Conan's stats and levels, and we see for the first time that it's possible to lose levels and stats as like you get older, and
you don't adventure for a few years.
Sure, right. It's not like it's not like a ratchet effect where these levels are permanent. You can lose them. The experience necessary for them will atrophy. And so that kind of like taking figures from media, whether it's a literature or TV or movies or whatever, and being inspired by them, letting them guide your character creation process, or taking elements from them and using them in your own games, is like if you deny yourself that because you're like, oh, I can't, it's not original, or people are going to find out or whatever, then like you're robbing yourself of a whole source of inspiration and like how you have learned about, say, storytelling techniques, what makes for an engaging narrative beat, like what makes for fun villainous schemes and personalities for antagonists. Like if you don't draw on that, then you're not using the store of knowledge you've built up here.
Well, yeah, it's like studying for a test and then saying, I'm not going to use any of that for this test.
Right. Yeah. So I see it though, but because people are sort of like, they want to feel like that they're being original, that their ideas are creative and inspired, and that they're not just ripping off something or copying it, especially like in front of their friends who they might be worried about, would disapprove or make fun of them, or just think that it was lame or something. And I mean, that's a lot of pressure to put on yourself.
Well, yeah, but I mean, I don't know. When you distill your experiences and your input, and kind of mix it up, though. I mean, that's the original part. As long as you're not like wholesale, just like I'm going to take this whole thing, and just change the names and change the locations, but it's the exact same setup, it's the exact same scenario. Well, yeah, you're going to get called.
The point of it is, and how you have fun with these things, is to take those original ideas, be inspired by them, right? Like, you say, oh my God, this character from this movie, or this character, they're compelling. There's something about them, something the way the actor portrays them, or something about the costume design, or something that's inspiring. But the point of the of RPGs and how you make something like not just a rip-off, but your own, is to like give it your own spin. And the fact that you're playing in a different setting, a different world, a different environment, maybe you're taking a modern day character and translating them to a fantasy medieval world or a sci-fi world or something. You've already begun that process of changing them, of taking this narrative element and making it your own. Just go a couple of steps further and add in other things, and you can kind of avoid the awkwardness of like, oh yeah, I have been inspired by this thing, I just saw this movie and it was like really cool and I want to do it.
Well, that happened to me accidentally, like in Starward Bound with the Heliac Sphere and DeCool's whole like family thing.
Yeah.
I originally, the setup that I had and ready to go, I thought was awesome until I saw the movie Aquaman. And then I was like, this is literally, it's not beat for beat, but it's 4 out of 5 beats.
Sure.
I'm like, well shit, now I got to change this. So I changed a few things, and then I started thinking about Hamlet. I'm like, wow, this is son coming home, things are amiss, something smells in the state of Denmark or whatever.
Yeah.
And so I added that wrinkle to it, but then changed a few of the beats inside of it. And so then it became a thing where I was combining kind of Aquaman and Hamlet and whatever, and it became its own thing. But I purposefully left some of the names very similar to Hamlet just to fuck with the players in the way that Marvel screws with everyone and their expectations.
Sure. Yeah.
Because sometimes that's fun to do. If you know your players know something, have the appearance of something else just to kind of mess with their expectations.
Yes.
Now that can be kind of dangerous.
It can be,
It
but
can
like,
annoy some players, but it's a fun way to do a little bit of a head fake with player knowledge versus PC knowledge.
Certainly, especially stuff that you know that they're not going to like be able to separate out, you know, and you just know, like, either it's something that they're, well studied in or something, or it's just something they're really into.
Yeah.
You're like, they're probably not going to be able to like separate themselves from this, but you can use that to subvert their expectations, make sure to keep them on their toes. I'll tell a personal story of mine where I was sort of inspired by another piece of media, and it didn't necessarily work out, although the campaign ended up working out. Players had requested a low down, just like gritty, low fantasy style campaign, and y'all had all wanted to roll like, I don't know, what 3d6 in order
row.
in third edition.
Yeah, we wanted old school, but for third edition,
right? Yeah. And so we're like, okay, we're gonna make use of those craft and profession skills, and you guys are villagers and craftsmen in this farm, and dealt with sort of like local problems in and around the community. And I forget what level it was, probably before 5th level or so.
I think we were 3rd or 4th.
3rd or 4th level. Yeah. One of the players at the table goes, "This is Quest for Glory, the Sierra Games adventure game."
If I remember correctly, we were interrogating a guard.
The Baroness's daughter had been kidnapped, and
Yeah,
there was a Minotaur guarding her, and there was like just a lot of little markers. And for me, it was like the campaign had sort of like grown up and developed over the course of a couple of sessions, and so I was like, this is one of my first video games I ever played. It'd been forever since I'd played it, so I wasn't quite clear on all the details. Just like, I'm going to be inspired by this thing, but I didn't really do any development of it. I didn't really change things. I didn't really make it my own, or like take the seed of the idea and let it grow in the soil of my imagination. I just like proper transplant.
Just transplanted the tree into your world.
Yeah, and one of the players was like, "Is that what this is?" And it's a moment where, and you'll have them as DMs, where a player will say something or do something, and you know that you face a choice, and it's like, you can deny, backpedal, no, that's not what this is, whatever. Try to massage things back on track.
Yeah.
No, don't know
retcon your own notes.
Yeah, you know you didn't look behind the curtain, or you can say yes. And you try to salvage from there. And so like you do these sometimes when you accidentally kill a PC, right? Like, and you look at the dice and you're like, that's way more hit points than they probably have, or something. You have a choice. You can not reveal that that's the die result that you rolled and pick something that won't kill them, or you can go with it and see what happens. And so that was mine. I was like, yeah, it is, and instantly was starting to change or make adjustments to what was going on in the game world, so that, number one, this person who'd also played these games a lot didn't like have an unfair advantage over everybody. And
yeah, they've already read the Cliff Notes.
Right, they've already read the Cliff Notes. And, it's not like anybody was mad or anything. He seemed kind of like
No, we all
glad that he was like, "Hey, is that really what this is?" I was like, "Awesome, I love that game."
Yeah, no, I remember it led to like a 30-minute aside where we all talked about Quest for Glory, and I was just like, I've never played it.
This is a great game. Ever since then, I just know if I'm going to take something from a video game, from a movie, from TV, something, I can't assume I'm the only one who's ever experienced this. And that was maybe easier to do back when I was a kid and like nerd shit was not as common. But like now, it's one of those things where I don't want to make the assumption that I'm the only one who's experienced this thing, so I don't want to just present something that's been undeveloped. I want to make it fit, be inspired by it to create something new, not just like rip it off.
One thing that I always try to do, and we've talked about before, is like the rule of 3.
Uh-huh.
Like try to draw from 3 different inspirations.
Sure, yeah.
Because when you take 3 inspirations and weave them together, you're creating something new.
Right, yeah, yeah.
I mean, you know, in a sense, it's just like baking, just like cooking, anything else. I mean, anybody can use chicken.
Yeah. But
it's the way you prepare it.
Like, there's a lot of different ways to approach that, right? You can try, like, two complementary and one sort of contradictory sort of influence, so that it creates a contrast and adds something new.
And the thing is there's multiple ways to implement it. It could be just like, oh, I really like the world from this one movie, but I like, you know, the villain's designs in this other one, and I like the social structure from this other one. And then when you kind of mesh them all together, I mean, you know, people can be like, oh, I see where that was inspired from. I love that too.
Right.
And it's a kind of a cultural touchstone. So
Certainly,
it's things where you, as you describe them and people kind of pick up on it, at least now you're in the same kind of headspace. With general descriptions.
Number one, being in the same headspace is important for a lot of people, particularly those that like really immersive styles of play. Staying in that headspace where you're making decisions as your character, and thinking like your character, then the more evocative that the other players at the table can be, the more they can contribute to building up of that immersive space. And so, like, thinking about the sorts of things that you're including in your game, how they're going to fit together, especially ones where it's like, I've been inspired by this, and if you're not really thinking it through, you might just try like one-to-one translation. Now you have a chance to sort of like let it marinate and sit and pick things that are going to be inspiring not just to you but your players, and like say something about the world and game you're trying to run.
Another avenue, kind of staying on the DM side of things, are of course NPC inspirations. We'll get to players, and you know, everybody wants to make whatever character, and I am a number one proponent of that.
Sure,
you know,
yeah,
it's literally how I make all my characters. But NPC inspiration, since I've started like DMing a lot more, is like, and for me, it starts with just like a character and a character's voice.
Right.
Like, I absolutely love like the freaking Godfather. I love the, you come to me on the day of my daughter's wedding, you know, and like I had to have a character like that. Of course, I made him a gnome.
Sure.
And like a tiny little, but he's just as dangerous. Don't fuck
Sure,
with the
yeah,
Gnomish
yeah.
mafia.
Don't mess with him.
Or you'll end up in a tiny, tiny grave. Right. They only build graves gnome size, and you're gonna fit.
Stuff you in it.
Yeah, you're gonna fit one way or another. But I also like have a beholder bartender that I wanted to be basically Sean Connery.
Right. Yeah.
Because The Rock and all that station is going to be in some bad straits, and they're going to need to break out of there. Yeah, they're going to need to break out of The Rock. Like, but that's the thing. I knew that would happen eventually, and that is precisely why I put him in there.
Yes.
Because eventually they're going to need his help to break out. To me, I want one line to hook them.
Yeah.
And then
The
info,
kind of
the one catchphrase to hook them, and then the info is to seat the hook.
Sure. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, when it comes to character inspiration,
Yeah.
this is an aspect where, like, I'm gonna make every freaking Clint Eastwood like gunslinger.
Yeah.
But in D&D.
But in D&D,
or
sure.
whatever. And we finally got to Eberron, and I finally got to make it right. Still haven't done the crossbow expert thing.
Not yet.
In 5th edition.
Not
but
yet.
It's coming. Don't worry, Jim. This is where you can play your heroes. This is where change the name. Do whatever. But like if you like that thing in that book, see how they play in another scenario. Take Aquaman, but give him Wolverine's backstory. How did he become a fish? Well, he was experimented on.
Maybe for some people, if it's like that, then playing just their actual influence, you might be handing them the perfect character. We had this a personal, friend of ours we used to play with. That game where it was like sort of the low magic, and then got sold to Fret on the City of Brass and sent off to Dis. We sat down with this one player and was just like, hey man, like you really seem to like this style of play. Your kind of favorite movies all have this certain style of hero, the very irreverent 80s action movie style. Why don't you just play this person? The name and everything. Just play them, and like I would say, in all the time that I was able to play, with that particular player, it was probably one of the most fun I've had with them in a game. It felt like that they were being honest about what they wanted out of the game and how much enjoyment they were getting out of it. If you have one of those players where it just seems like they can never find a character that matches the tone of the game or that matches their play style, allowing yourself to be inspired by characters from the media you enjoy, which you're already being inspired by whether you know it or not, that's already influencing you, like being explicit about that can sometimes be a big boon.
Yeah, it was very freeing. The range of characters I've played after that has been nuts.
Yeah,
It was almost like it was like it finally freed me. I was like, okay, I finally did it. I finally put a pin in that that idea. I don't know. Sometimes it's fun to really lean into to tropes. Like one of my favorite tropes to lean into is the constructed weapon that escaped.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Right? I mean, like, it's the River Tam, what like one of my favorite characters ever, TK-808, constructed by Lithids to be this badass, and she escapes and goes and exacts revenge. I mean, like, it's 11 from Stranger Things.
Yes.
I mean, this is replete in a, it's be careful what you create, because it might come back and destroy you. The Frankenstein's monster. That will always be a trope that is worth playing.
Some things are classic.
Some things are classic, and some things, until they're completely out of our real world, they will always be in our media.
I'm much the same way. It took me, I easily for 10 years I played the same character. Really didn't get to play that often, and so every time I did, I'd be like, I want to play the mysterious, power-hungry magic user, right? Like that's a trope. That's an archetypal character that I want to portray in these games. But every time I would sit down to play, we weren't running the game where being a mysterious power. We weren't playing Ars Magica. We weren't playing, Magic the Gathering, or not Magic the Gathering, Mage the Ascension. We weren't playing any of those other kind of
Dragonlance?
right. Yeah,
sounds very Raceland.
I mean, you weren't playing, but it is right. Like I found like that Raceland. I preferred Raceland over Elminster, and didn't really.
Yeah, it's some edge. I mean, I'm sorry, but
it took me playing a character in a D&D game where I was a power mad, scrappy kind of wizard, and had a good time with it, even if I didn't get to like the heights of 9th level spells. Since then, I've played fewer and fewer mages, and every time I do, I'm more and more just kind of like, done this already. Like, how many times can you cast this spell? It doesn't change that much between editions, Well, I mean, most of them kind of do the same thing. Like, how many times can you charm somebody or put them to sleep or zip around a battlefield or something before it's like you want to try something new?
Yeah.
I was inspired by historical figures, not necessarily literary ones. And so I'd be like, oh, this Renaissance mercenary captain behaved like this. This is how they acted. This is what they were like. Well, let's make a character based on them. That's my personal journey. So,
I love it. So you can get tripped up on being too overt with the cliches.
Oh, sure.
Or whatever. So how do you do that, or subvert the cliche?
If you're a long time, veteran of fantasy RPGs or just role playing in general, you probably know what these cliches are. But they're sort of like a Manichaean black and white worldview in which good and evil are distinct and separate forces. That a place where warriors are good and noble and like and the violence and injustice are these kind of like rare blips or aberrations in the social order. Like, what you can do with like avoiding cliches in those situations is just to be familiar with the kinds of archetypes that are there. And if you want to, say, avoid the cliches of being like, say, a goody, do-gooder knight in shining armor or something like that, or a power-hungry wizard who is selfish and doesn't think of the rest of the group. Like, just being aware of them will help you avoid them. Being aware of them will help you understand the parts of the cliche that you can take and change. So maybe you're playing a half-orc and you don't want to play the cliched, I come from a broken family, where one of my parents assaulted the other and now I'm the product of rape and violence and fear. Like, that's a pretty tired and, quite frankly, problematic trope. So you could take that and say, like, well, maybe my character's not. Maybe they're from a different part of the world where orcs and people, or orcs are people, and orcs and humans treat each other differently. Maybe it's completely opposite, and my orcish mother and human father love each other very dearly. And
I'm seeing like bordering kingdoms, and the parents were like part of an arranged marriage.
Sure.
You do the noble background with your half orc because you're a fucking prince.
Yeah.
Your mother was an orcish princess, and your father was a baron, a duke.
Certainly.
Be a kick-ass duke.
So that's one way of like avoiding them or subverting them, is to just be aware of them and then take select pieces that you think are either uninspiring or unoriginal, or you don't necessarily like them, and find something else. Orcs and gnolls and goblins and everything, they are people. They have a culture. They have, moral agency. But the conflict is not one of good and evil, black and white, cosmic kind of stakes. they want something different than us. Negotiations have broken down and we are now at war with the Orcish peoples, or the goblins are fleeing something even worse. And initially we fight them because, that's just how we roll. They've been our traditional enemies for centuries. But this time feels different, and oh crap, there's something worse, and now we have to both make up for these lost times and try to heal some kind of the great wounds that exist because we face an existential threat. You've complicated things in a way that's added something to the story. It's a long tradition in RPGs to take all kinds of things and mash them up and throw them in a blender. The classic model for a hex crawl is you make a hex map and then you pour through your Dragon magazine collection, your collection of slim staple bound modules, your big hardcover stuff, and you just go like, all right, the Temple of Elemental Evil's here, the Village of Omelet's here, this is where the Keep on the Borderlands is, we're going to do Against the Giants over here, this is where whatever is, and like, with the explosion of content on the internet, like most of that can come from, say, the multitude of free one-page dungeons that are out there, or the other kinds of quality adventures that people are writing either on blogs or places like DriveThruRPG or other content sharing sites. It's like you have a multitude of things to be influenced by. So it's a good idea to learn how to develop those influences into something that is uniquely yours.
Yeah.
And that's good times.
If you like the video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe.
WebDM exists thanks to our Patreon patrons, the Web Demons.
If you join the Web Demons, you'll get our weekly podcast, show audio, discounts that'll save you way more than $5 a month on books and dice, and so much more. Check out our free podcast episodes right now, including our free interview with Luke Gygax about all things D&D.
If you like our advice for your games, then why don't you come check us out and watch us play?
Yeah, we've got games on Twitch every week, and they're archived on our second YouTube channel, WebDM Plays.
Thanks for watching. I'm sorry, Hawkeye Pierce is my be-all, end-all, number one inspiration from anything I've ever watched. I grew up watching MASH, and just the idea of Pierce, his irreverence, his absolute intellectual, fortitude, is always, just fuck you, authority. But he's going to do the right thing no matter what.
Oh yeah, well,
but he's got, he's a boozer and a womanizer. I mean, he's not. That's the thing, is he's not a perfect character, and that's what I love about him. Is there's many aspects to him, but being able to play that in a Call of Cthulhu game, because it was the whole thing with MASH was just what do you this is how you handle insanity. You either you make fun of it or you go crazy, and sometimes you do both at the same time.